Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lazarević. I'm an associate at Gecić Law, and I'm pleased to guide you through today's program. First of all, I would like to thank the wonderful children of the Music of Hope program. Music of Hope is a charitable program that opens the door to a brighter future, giving every child the chance to learn through the power of music, while also providing vital support to their families. Their performance was not only inspiring, but also a powerful reminder of why we are here today, to engage in a meaningful discussion about the challenges and responsibilities that lie ahead. On behalf of Gecić Law and the Responsible Business Hub of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia, as well our partners Gecić and Initiative for Global Solidarity, I wish you a warm welcome to today's landmark conference on the evolving carbon border adjustment mechanism and its regional implications. Today's conference is coming at a crucial moment. The European Parliament and European Council have recently adopted simplification package. As announced in February, it set the stage for profound changes in the CBAM regulation. Our conference will examine CBAM during this transitional phase of its implementation and explore how the latest legislative updates impact Western Balkan businesses and particularly those in industries that fall within CBAM scope. We'll also ask how regional governments and businesses can shift from reactive compliance to strategic positioning. What can we learn from non-EU countries like UK and which are crafting national responses to safeguard their industries while aligning with EU climate goals? The session today will look beyond the regulatory text and into practical options for a response strategy the Western Balkans can adopt, and including carbon pricing, CBAM exemptions, as well transitional support and regional carbon leakage measures. We hope the discussions here will lead into practical outcome, a clearer understanding of CBAM's legal and financial implications, concrete steps to build institutional and industrial readiness, and new opportunities for regional collaboration in the EU. With that, it is my pleasure to officially open our program and invite our first speaker and guest of honor, Her Excellency, the Minister of Domestic and Foreign Trade of the Government of the Republic of Serbia, Mrs. Jagoda Lazarević, to deliver their opening address. Madam Minister, please take the floor.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure for me to welcome you here in Belgrade on occasion of this conference dedicated to one of the currently most intriguing topics, EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, or CBAM, an initiative of profound importance both for Serbia and our Western Balkan peers. 22 years ago at the Thessaloniki summit, the European Union made it clear that the future of the Western Balkans lies within the EU. This was a more than promise. It was a strategic vision of a united, free, and stable Europe, built on peace, prosperity, and shared responsibility. I would like just to quote a part of the declaration from Thessaloniki. We all share the values of democracy, the rule of law, respect for human and minority rights, solidarity, and market economy, fully aware that they constitute the very foundations of the European Union, respect of international law, inviolability of international borders, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and regional cooperation are principles of the highest importance to which we are all committed. The stabilization and association process established through this Stabilization Association Agreement was designed to turn this vision into reality. The agreement set out political and economic reforms framework and envisaged deep economic integration, particularly through bilateral free trade with the European Union. Today, 22 years later, the economies of the Western Balkans are all deeply integrated with the EU. Serbia is the leading trading partner of the EU from the whole Western Balkans, accounting for more than 50% of WB exports to the EU. Serbia remains fully committed to its EU path, with a full membership being our strategic goal. Meanwhile, EU remains our key trade partner and main source of FDI. 60% of our merchandise exports, 46% of our export of services, and 3/5 of all FDIs are coming from the EU member states, representing a building block between Serbia and the EU as important drivers of our growth and development. I would like to remind you that 6 out of 10 largest foreign investors and 4 out of 10 leading exporters are companies owned by their EU investors. In the past 10 years only, if we look at that period, trade volume between the EU and Serbia has more than doubled, while our merchandise exports registered 2.34 increase. In the same time, our services export surged 2.7 times. The underlying logic of our partnership is straightforward: trade liberalization, economic development, and regional cooperation, directly contributing to the lasting stability. This is stabilization imperative, embedded in our agreement, and it remains central to Serbia's path to the EU. The Republic of Serbia is firmly committed to building a sustainable, climate-resilient economy. We have joined the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans and are striving toward climate neutrality by 2050. To that end, the government of the Republic of Serbia is accelerating both regulatory alignment and investment in renewable energy sources. This is not merely a requirement of the accession process. It reflects our belief that environmental sustainability is essential for Serbia's future. However, we must acknowledge a key reality. Serbia remains heavily reliant on carbon-intensive industries. Coal accounts for around 67% of electricity generation, our most telling indicator of the challenge we are facing. Industries such as steel, cement, and fertilizer are major employers and exporters. Transitioning these sectors to more sustainable business models and accelerating decarbonization will require both substantial financial resources and time. We are moving wisely toward modernization and green transformation, but we must do so fairly, protecting the jobs and local communities without undermining economic stability during this complex and lengthy transition period. We understand the rationale behind the CBAM, preventing carbon leakage and ensuring a level playing field in the EU market. Serbia supports the core goal of reducing global emissions, as evidenced by numerous documents adopted by the government of the Republic of Serbia. However, we must speak openly and loudly about the potential effects of this mechanism on Serbia and the entire Western Balkans. In practice, CBAM functions as a new import tariff regime based on the carbon content of products we export to the EU market. For our industries, especially steel and electricity, this represents a significant economic challenge. Estimates indicate that CBAM will have serious financial implications which could undermine our competitiveness, have a strong impact on our economic growth and employment. This raises an essential question: is CBAM, in its current form, truly compatible with the principles of our Stabilization and Association Agreement? That agreement is fundamentally based on commitments to tariff-free trade, gradual economic convergence, and regional stability. Introducing measures that resemble new tariffs risks undermining these fundamental tenets, particularly economic stabilization, potentially reversing hard-won progress and two decades of dedicated commitment and cooperation. It could also jeopardize public support for Serbia's EU accession process and make it harder to build the necessary political consensus for accessional reforms. This reflection should not be seen as a rejection of the CBAM or resistance to change, on the contrary, but rather as a call for its implementation to take into account our shared history, obligations, and mutual interests. Serbia calls for a balanced, cooperative approach that aligns environmental protection goals with the core principles of the Stabilization Association process, the cornerstone of the EU-Western Balkans relations. For these reasons, we must consider the following. A share of CBAM revenues should be allocated to Serbia and its regional peers to finance decarbonization, industrial modernization, and workforce reskilling. This would promote continued economic stabilization in the region, and in this way CBAM could become a genuine instrument of solidarity, encouraging a just transition rather than imposing unsustainable costs. B. Flexible phase deadlines and transitional arrangements should be introduced, particularly for candidate countries engaged in the SAA process, such as Serbia. If Serbia introduces domestic carbon pricing, as it currently planned on a short-term basis, this should directly offset our CBAM obligations. Such a flexibility would not be a concession to export-oriented companies, but an incentive for aligning with the climate policies and EU legal standards. Lastly, CBAM should be integrated into our stabilization and association dialogue, using existing institutions to monitor its effects and allow for policy adjustments to preserve stabilization goals, especially in the socio-economic sphere. These steps would reaffirm the spirit of the stabilization association process, partnership, mutual support, and shared responsibility for the future of our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, Serbia fully embraces and supports the EU's climate ambitious, environmental commitments and standards, despite our relatively small share in both global and historical carbon emissions. But a truly sustainable path requires not only ambitious environmental policies, but also a stable economy and supportive society. Together, we must strike a balance between climate ambition and stability, ensuring economic fairness and regional prosperity. CBAM must not become a barrier that separates Europe from the Western Balkans, but rather a bridge that facilitates Serbia's successful green transition and deeper integration into the European family. Let us be partners on this European journey toward a carbon-neutral future supported and encouraged. In conclusion, I would like to thank the conference organizers, all the experts and panelists who will share their perspectives on this important topic today, especially the European Commission, the representative of DG TAXUD, for presenting the latest developments in the EU legislation in this area, as well as all those present for showing interest in this highly significant issue. I wish you a very productive and constructive dialogue today, a very successful conference, and I'm looking forward to the new events dedicated to this very important topic, because I would like to recall, we don't have much time. We're already at the heart of the 2025. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I would now like to introduce the hosts of today's event, Mr. Marko Čadež, the President of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia, and Mr. Bogdan Gecić, founding partner at Gecić Law. I would invite them to give us the opening address. Please take the floor.
Just stand
Will be
next to
first.
you.
I like it very much. I really enjoy it very much. Esteemed Minister Lazarević, dear Jagoda, distinguished Ms. Sallard, dear Mr. Gecić, my friend Bogdan, respected representatives of the state, Brussels institutions, EU delegation, embassies of the member countries, expert community, and last but not least, in my case first, respected members of community of my own, dear business people and director of the Regional Chamber of Commerce, welcome, and I am really pleased to greet you to this conference dedicated to CBAM with the support of our strategic partner GIZ and organized by the responsible business hub of the Chamber of Commerce of Industry of Serbia and our very nice partner Bogdan and Gecić law firm. We are considering this is the right moment for this conference and CBAM as a topic. As you know, the European Parliament and the EU Council reached an agreement on CBAM simplification package. That package brings significant changes. First of all, the exemption of small importers from the obligation to report, as well as the postponement of the deadline of purchasing certificates to February 2027. This is a good news. It gives us time to prepare ourselves as well as a possible for the start of collecting the CBAM tax, but it does not mean a postponement of responsibility and reporting obligations. For Serbia and the entire region, it is no longer just one of the Brussels regulation that we will fulfill in the process of association, nor is it a matter of choice and just reporting obligation. It is already a question of future competitiveness and survival of our companies. Will they adapt and advance, or will they stay on the sidelines and wait for the consequences? Will they be able to export all from 2026 at what price? Will they be competitive on the EU markets, which is our most important foreign trade partner? Will they be able to get bank loans? CBAM is not an issue of just about 2,400 companies that's exported CBAM goods from Serbia to the EU market last year, and which already reported the customers in the EU about the emission incorporated in their project. Although represented almost a quarter, 23% of the total number of exporters in the EU. To date, these are companies from the steel and iron, cement, fertilizer, aluminum, electricity sectors. Tomorrow, as already announced, petrochemical industry and parts of the chemical industry, which is also significant in Serbian export. We be included, and other sectors will be covered over time, but their suppliers as well. This is an important issue in the context of the demands and wishes of the business community of the region. For the European Union to provide the Western Balkan economies with full access to the single market as soon as possible, even before our full membership. We are well aware that one of the conditions will be to establish a national, regional, and national carbon tax collection system that the EU would recognize and acknowledge as its own part. The question of the survival of our companies on the EU market is also a question of cooperation in the Western Balkan. What we have done as a chamber, and what I think is not a small amount of energy that we spent on this topic, we satisfied, and Chamber of Commerce and Industry as a business association adapted, first of all, the Declaration on Green Transformation of the Serbian economy to encourage and support companies in the process of transitioning. We established the internal green expert team with knowledge and experience to support companies in their transformation toward low carbon and sustainable business. In cooperation with our partner GIZ, we established the Responsible Business Hub. We established the CCIS Green Academy in order to provide companies with quality training and support. We are very particularly proud of the speed of response when it comes to CBAM. We implemented well-prepared, detailed expert sector trainings for companies from threatened industries and then specialized workshops. These sector-oriented and specialized trainings and workshops were attended until now by more than 700 participants for more than 400 manufacturing and foreign trade companies, and we made the training material available to all the companies. We also established a help desk, and I call you really to use it as a channel for daily communication with companies and prompt answers to business people questions. However, our companies are to face challenges much greater than information and obligation and the skills to report on emission. From the increase in production costs and the price of final products with the onset of tax collection, through decrease in competitiveness relative to not only producers from the EU, but also producers coming from countries where there is a national carbon tax. And of course, administrative burdens. To securing the funds, that is, of course, financing of investments in new and clean technologies and equipment, which would contribute to the reduction of emissions. Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia is still committed to supporting the economy in this process through education, information, connecting with the expert, dialogue with state individuals. However, in order to support our companies to respond to new challenges and protect the domestic market, the involvement, cooperation, and support of the state and financial institutions and experts is very, very needed. In order not only to state the needs as a contribution to this discussion, I will present some specific proposals, some call for actions, in three possible pillars of future activities. Primarily the establishment of domestic GHG emission trading system and the establishment of the Green Fund. Introduction of a national and regional CBAM tax, harmonized with European standards, which would protect the local market from goods that will flee from the EU market after the full implementation of CBAM. And the last but not least, state support to the economy in the form of direct financial incentives and tax reliefs. I invite you to take the presence today on this conference of representatives of states, the EU, domestic and international experts, and the conference define the best responses to the situation in which our companies find themselves, and then to work together at both the national and the regional level. because I'm really also convinced that CBAM is not just an obstacle and a cost, but also an incentive and an opportunity to use new technologies and innovations to raise the technological level of our industries for more environmental friendly production, advance processes, improve energy efficiency, maintain access to key markets, and open doors to new ones. It is also an opportunity for deeper cooperation in the region and deeper connection of our businesses in the region. It is a hard, I think, and not a short journey in front of us. It is a huge challenge in front of us. And without this kind of exchange, I don't think that we will manage it. So today, use the day to start the journey the best way we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marko. Good morning, everyone. I'll be short because you'll see more of me during the day. I would like to welcome you all to the CBAM Belgrade 2025 conference. Madam Minister, distinguished speakers and guests, representatives of the European Commission, EBRD, President Čadež, and friends and colleagues from across the Western Balkans and beyond, thank you for joining us. As you know, my name is Bogdan Gecić. On this occasion, I also want to thank my wonderful team for helping organizing all of this. Our intention was that we stay true to what we preach, and that is to bring Brussels to Belgrade. And we're very happy to say that I think we've managed that thanks to all of you. CBAM is, for us lawyers, one of the most interesting developments in trade law in the last few decades, if not longer. For businesses, it's, to be quite candid, probably a headache. But our intention is that instead of a lot of theory today, we have something which is more of a boardroom discussion, where we will have panelists, engaging talks, hopefully, a chance for all of you to ask questions and interact, so that we can actually learn and discuss and better understand what is coming. If we talk about how quickly CBAM will become a reality, the transition phase is already ongoing. Come January 1st, it will be something that we will all have to live with and advise businesses, partners, government stakeholders, and of course talk with the Commission and the European Union. So on that note, let's start with the conference. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Bogdan. Today's keynote speaker brings us the latest insights from Brussels and the heart of EU climate and trade policy. Please welcome Ms. Delphine Sallard, Senior Expert at the Director General and Taxation and Customs Union of the European Commission, a key figure on EU CBAM's team. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So thank you first to the organizer of this conference. I'm impressed really by how successful it is. And it is indeed a great opportunity for us, the European Commission, to explain further what CBAM is. Though from the exchanges I already had yesterday with some of you and what I've been hearing this morning, I know and I see that you all know what CBAM is. So please excuse me if I say things that are evident, but I would like also to take this opportunity to clarify some elements. So, that's my slide is here. So CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, is one of the key instruments adopted by the European Commission as part of the European Green Deal. You know that in view of the major challenge that we're facing of the global warming, the Commission and the European Union have taken very ambitious commitment of becoming net zero by the European Union becoming a net zero by 2050. That the European Commission has proposed and the Council and Parliament have adopted very ambitious reforms that are part of the EU Green Deal. Among them has been the reinforcement of the ETS and the EU CBAM. So what is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism? Well, first I should have introduced myself. Indeed, I'm Delphine Sallard, working for the Director General for Taxation and Customs Union in the European Commission, though CBAM is not a tax. It's an environmental instrument. So the lead in the Commission is DG TAXUD, but CBAM is an environmental instrument that mirrors the European ETS. The aim of the CBAM is to ensure that for the goods the most carbon intensive and in the sectors the most at risk of carbon leakage because of the carbon intensity and because of the high trade of this good, we address the risk of carbon leakage by ensuring that a similar price is paid by the importers as the one that is paid by the EU producers. The CBAM is mirroring the ETS. The CBAM applies to goods imported. It doesn't apply to countries. It applies to the goods that are imported. It is aligned with EU international commitments, and in particular, the WTO environment, and especially because there is no discrimination. The price of the financial adjustment will be mirroring the price that EU producers are paying. And no carbon price will be paid twice. Any carbon price already paid will be deducted. So the CBAM being an environmental instrument, it's focusing on 6 sectors that are most carbon intensive and where the goods most at risk of carbon leakage. Cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. It is possible, and indeed we will be publishing a report by the end of the year, analyzing or putting forward some proposal with respect of the possible extension of CBAM to some sectors. But any extension of CBAM could be done only to sectors or to goods in sectors that are under EU ETS. Again, this principle of mirroring. I heard a call for transition, and I think indeed that's a very important element when you introduce a new instrument. And the CBAM was constructed with a 2 years, bit more than 2 years transition period. It entered into force in October 23, and it's only as of 2026 that the financial adjustment will be due. During 2 years, we have asked importers to report on the goods they imported, the embedded emission, so that we understand further and better how the CBAM will work, so that stakeholders have more time to prepare, and also for us to better reflect the specificities of the production process in the CBAM sectors. And we have learned from this transition period. As mentioned already by the speakers, we have introduced a simplification of CBAM. I will be presenting the detail in the next slide. As of 2026, a CBAM financial adjustment will be due. It will be based on the actual embedded emission, meaning that any decarbonization of the production process will translate in a competitive advantage. When I'm asked, what can we do to prepare for CBAM, my answer is decarbonize. Any company that individually progress in the decarbonization of its competitive advantage, of its production process, will have a competitive advantage. The CBAM is a mirror of the EU ETS. So it is meant to make sure that there is no disadvantage to the imports of goods, meaning that any free allowances that EU producers are receiving will be deducted from the CBAM financial adjustment. It is based on the ETS price, and as I mentioned already, no carbon price should be paid twice, so any carbon price effectively paid will be deducted. The fact that any free allowances granted to EU producers will be deducted from the CBAM financial adjustment means that not only there was a 2-year transition period where only reporting was requested, but also the financial adjustment itself will be introduced over the next 10 years, where the free allowances under under ETS are being phased out. As part of the ambitious commitment under the EU Green Deal, we are phasing out the free allowances given to EU producers. They will have, by 2034, to pay the full ETS price. But that means that the importers will also be paying the CBAM financial adjustment fully only in 2034, in 10 years from now. What does CBAM mean for Serbia? In 2024, about 12% of Serbia's export to the EU were CBAM goods in value, mainly iron and steel products and electricity, but also a bit of fertilizers and aluminium. And I would like to anticipate already a question that I've been asked. Why is the percentage of CBAM goods in Serbia's export decreasing? It's not that Serbia is exporting less of CBAM goods. It's that if you look at the values, it's not. It's stable. It's that the percentage of CBAM goods is decreasing in Serbian export because Serbia is exporting more of other goods, not exporting less CBAM goods. It's just increasing the share of the other goods. In terms of CBAM reporting, so for 2 years we've been asking importers to declare the goods they were importing, the quantity of goods, and the embedded emission in the goods. So looking at the data, there is one element that I would like to underline on the right-hand chart. The chart on the right-hand side, the chart showing the actual value versus the default value. You know that under CBAM, you can declare either the actual embedded emission or use a default value that has been assessed at the level of the country. Meaning that if your production process is not decarbonized, you may want indeed to use the default value. If your production process is well decarbonized, use the actual value, you will have a competitive advantage. Now, it's true that not all companies have the means to identify the actual value. Not all companies have developed a proper monitoring, reporting, and verification system. But this chart on the right-hand side shows that as at the end of last year, 73% of the Serbian goods were reported using actual value. This is a very good figure. It shows that 73% of the companies, or the goods imported from companies, Serbian companies were able to assess the embedded emission in their goods. And indeed, I expect that percentage to be even higher in the future, because when you look at the big exporters, when you look at those reporting more than 1,000 tons of goods, there is 100%. Indeed, it makes sense. Bigger companies are better able to monitor the embedded emission. And that's why we are doing this CBAM simplification, because we wanted to minimize the administrative burden for smaller companies. So, what are the next steps? Oh, sorry, I had forgotten that I had that slide already. We have learned also from the reporting of first period. We've been listening to concerns expressed by some companies saying, under the CBAM reporting, you're asking us to share business-sensitive data. First, we want to reassure them we have very strong rules in terms of protecting information in the EU. But nevertheless, we heard the concern and we set up a specific portal for exporters. If they do not want to share the data with the declarants, they can share the data directly with the European Commission. So yes, this transition period was also for us to learn. Now, I see that I didn't include there the slide, and I'm going to go back one second, a slide on the next steps. Before the end of the year, we're going to adopt a number of implementing acts that will specify some elements of the CBAM regulation. And among these implementing acts, I should mention one that will be setting the adjustment for free allocation. So you will know before the end of the year by how much the CBAM financial adjustment will be decreased, or it will be deducted from it, the ETS free allocation. You will know also, so by the end of the year, how the carbon price effectively paid will be deducted. So, CBAM simplification. As I said, we listened to stakeholders, and we looked at the reporting for the first year, and we saw that 90% of the declaration pertained to small imports. Small imports of goods that were so small that it represented only 1% of embedded emission. So not very efficient in terms of environment protection, but very time-consuming for the declarants. So we're changing the de minimis rule. It's not only imports of less than 150 euros that are exempt. It will be imports of less than 50 tons across the year that will be exempt. We want to focus CBAM on those imports that are the most meaningful in terms of carbonization or decarbonization, in terms of fight against the risk of climate change. So with exempting the small imports, we will still capture 99% of the embedded emission, but we will have 80% of the declarants that were identified initially that will not have to declare anymore. The 80% is an average. I'm not saying that in Serbia it will be precisely 80%. The rule is exports of less than 50 tons will be excluded. In parallel with this new de minimis rule, we will allow, we're proposing a number of simplification elements in terms of reporting, including the possibility to use default carbon price for claiming the deduction of carbon price effectively paid. And we will be excluding from the manufacturing process the aluminium and steel downstream goods that were not under the ETS. We are simplifying some elements with respect to the condition of reporting actual values versus default values. We are extending the deadline for submission of the CBAM declarations. And we will be explicitly exempting the emission of precursors that were produced in the EU. Precursor that is produced in the EU, an ETS price has been paid. So the CBAM regulation foresaw that the ETS price paid would be deducted. But rather, that's cumbersome. I mean, that's red tape. Only you're not. Rather than having to deduct something, you just don't account for it. So that's why we're going to exclude the emission of precursor. And indeed, as already mentioned, it's only the financial adjustment will have to be paid or will have to be accounted for as of 2026. But the payment for 2026 will be due only in 27. That means it will be due ex post instead of ex ante. We're also changing the rule for buying the certificates. We're changing it from 80% to 50%. So lower financial constraints. And as I mentioned, a default carbon price paid in third countries. So that for those countries where the carbon price is low, those for companies that do not want to go through all the administrative burden of providing all the evidence on the carbon price paid, will can use a carbon price by default. So what are the next steps? Before the summer, we will be publishing a communication on the risk of carbon leakage. And before the end of the year, we will be publishing a report in which we will be analyzing the impact of CBAM. The regulation foresees that the analysis should be focused on developing countries and least developed countries. I think we're going to have a slightly wider scope. But also the possibility to extend the CBAM to other ETS sectors are at risk of carbon leakage and to downstream goods. Sorry, in the slides I also mentioned indeed direct or indirect emission. Something that I went through very quickly. CBAM covers direct emission, but also indirect emission for the production of cement and fertilizers. Why only those two sectors? It comes from the ETS and some specificities of the ETS in those two sectors. Now we have heard a number of stakeholders saying, well, if you do not include indirect emission in my aluminium sector, you're not recognizing all the efforts we have done in our country to green the grid. Our sector is heavily reliant on electricity. By not recognizing not taking into account the indirect emission, you do not recognize the effort we did to green the electrical grid. So we're looking at whether we should expand the coverage of CBAM also to indirect emission in the other sectors. Extension of the CBAM good, whether it's to other sectors or to downstream goods. For other sectors, as I said, the first foremost and key criteria is that must be an ETS sectors. For any extension, it must be sector or goods at risk of carbon leakage, so high trade intensity. And a criteria that will be particularly important for any extension of the CBAM goods downstream, so down the value chain, it's the administrative and technical feasibility. CBAM being based on embedded emission, we must be able to, or the declarants must be able to identify the embedded emission in the good, and the more downstream you go, the more complex the good is, and the more difficult it may be to identify the embedded emission. Now, CBAM is a very useful instrument, but we do hear concern that it's a complex instrument. So that's why we have done training, guidances. We have published templates for declaration. We have a website, you have the address at the top of that page, where all this material is available, and in particular, the frequently asked questions, which are regularly updated based on the questions we receive. So I will invite any company that has questions to look at the frequently asked question. There's a high likelihood that you're not the first one to face that issue, and that there is already an answer. And if you do not find the answer, did I change? Yeah, I did change the color, because yesterday I made that presentation and the email address was not visible, and I think that's what you're most interested in, is how you can contact us if you have further questions. And before I finish, I would just like to underline try to answer one of the questions asked this morning. How can we prepare for CBAM? Decarbonize the production process. The lower the carbon intensity of the goods you produce and which you are exporting is, the more competitive your goods will be. CBAM can be a competitive tool. And as for what can be done at national level, I would refer to introducing a carbon price. Can be a tax, can be an ETS. We do not say, the regulation says carbon price effectively paid. There are now some 75 carbon price schemes across the world in some 50 countries. Why such a development of the carbon price schemes? Because carbon price is a very effective tool to foster decarbonization. Any carbon price effectively paid will be deducted from the financial assessment, and that's a way to keep the revenue in the country. So thank you again for inviting me to this conference, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Sallard, for setting the stage for today's conference and those valuable insights. We now move into our first panel discussion, From Reporting to Reality, the Western Balkans at the Carbon Border Crossroads, moderated by Mr. Bogdan Gecić. This panel will explore CBAM's legal reforms, new compliance thresholds, and how our region can prepare for the shift from reporting to payment under the updated framework. Please welcome our distinguished panelists. Professor Til Müller-Ibold, coming from the University of Passau as Professor of Law and retired partner of Cleary Gottlieb from Brussels. Mr. Marcel Duits, Chief CBAM Officer from Dubrink. Mrs. Jovana Joksimović, Assistant Minister at the Ministry of Mining and Energy of Serbia, Tanja Lindell, Director Assistant and RBH Project Manager at CCIS, as well Mr. Uroš Milosavljević from KPMG, a partner. Thank you. Please take the floor.
Please, gents.
I think it's that.
And I'll take this one. You just jump in. No, please, feel free. Okay, sorry. Well, let's kick off this. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you with us. So, this first panel is imagine that we unpack the omnibus package that we started discussing. So the reporting transition phase has been already ongoing for a while now. The omnibus has been a thing of foyer discussions for the last 6 months. The texts have been finally agreed by Parliament and Council. Hopefully the trialogue will produce something official within the next before the summer would be fantastic. Thank you, Commission. And then we will have more clarity on what to expect. Secondary legislation has been also in the pipeline, so we're hoping for all that. But I would like to start with maybe just a little bit of an intro and tell to you on what's your take on the omnibus and what can we expect going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks also for inviting me. Looking forward to an interesting round of discussion. I thought, we should start perhaps of reminding ourselves of the fact how the ETS system and the CBAM actually interact. Yeah, you have to look at the ETS system in a way first, because it came first, and after it had been running for a while, and the emission trading system got moving, the union and the various producers realized that this originally environmentally founded system actually led to some competitive disadvantage for the European industry, because they were paying for the fact that Europe did a substantial move towards decarbonization. And so as to try to broaden a little bit the scope of those that should be paying for this, and so as to create a bit more of a level playing field within the union, the idea emerged: we will make the other people, i.e. those that sell carbon-rich products on the union market, we will make them pay as well. So the idea of a CBAM, of an adjustment mechanism, was quite an interesting new development, as you said, in terms of trade law. It was a singular move by the union on a worldwide basis. Now, the system is set up, or was originally set up, in a way that it really tried to avoid overcompensation by allowing deduction of carbon costs that were incurred outside the union. But it became and continues to be a very complex system. And even though I heard the Commission say we listened to users, I think you also listened to member states. And member states were increasingly concerned about the level of administrative input that was required from the various players within the union. And I think if you look at the omnibus package, and that's my first observation in that context, you see that the simplification is not only, but to a significant extent also geared towards EU companies, in particular EU SMEs that get a number of simplification measures that are available only for those companies established in the Union. That has to do, there are a couple of examples, we can perhaps get into them during the discussion. Secondly, the process of omnibus now helps to also reduce the overall burden, and we've seen a number of examples on your slides, and I think I'm not going to go through them again. What I think when we were looking at the economic effects or at the phase-in that you presented on the slides, I think the second important element that people need to keep in mind when they look at the overall CBAM structure is that unlike what you can easily see from the outside, it's not a two-phase process, but the second phase has a phase in and by itself as a result of the free allowances being eliminated in the ETS system, and then as a result or in parallel, the implementation of the full costs of the adjustment that will be charged. So I think that's a positive thing. It's not linked to the omnibus package, that's part of the design. And it is meant to ensure this parallelism of what the union industry pays and what the exporters from third countries into the union pay. My last few sentences, because we wanted to leave time for discussion afterwards, are a little bit some reflections on the economic effects. And for those interested, there is a fairly recent OECD policy paper that looks at these effects in addition to an older World Bank analysis. What you see is that what CBAM does, or maybe one should start with the ETS, that created competitive disadvantages for the European industry. And the idea of CBAM was to broaden these effects a little bit, at least for within the Union. Now, the overall effect of CBAM is therefore to protect, to some extent, the carbon-intensive industry in the Union from the effects of the ETS. It also leads to a situation where the downstream industry in the Union actually is put on a worldwide scale at a slight disadvantage, because not only are the products they are sourcing within the Union, from producers within the Union, become more expensive, but that effect will also be relevant now with respect to imports. So on the one hand, you can say the loophole is closed. On the other hand, the ability to react and the risk of carbon leakage by on the downstream industries will increase. Nevertheless, the OECD team analyzed this and said overall the introduction of CBAM will reduce the risk of carbon leakage from the Union, so that the policy objective that the Union pursued with that will be effective. Nevertheless, at the expense of whom? Interestingly, the OECD study comes to the conclusion that many of the trading partners of the Union will also benefit. It's a little unclear on what economic basis that statement is made, because a good portion of the costs are externalized from the Union. But what the OECD analysis also brings to the fore quite clearly is that among the trading partners of the Union that have a relatively high level of carbon intensity in its energy and other production processes, those trading partners will actually suffer. And the question then becomes, who are they? Serbia and the Western Balkans are probably in the category of high energy, high carbon intensive energy production. Serbia probably more than a couple of the other Western Balkan countries, but maybe that's something that we can discuss. However,
Sorry for interjecting. First of all, I'm conscious of time, but I'm also a little bit myopic. So I have a question. In your chart, that country that's circled, that's Serbia.
That's
correct?
Serbia. Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's pretty much the second highest one that will be hit in the chart, if I get that right.
But be careful. These numbers, you had more recent data. This is from the old World Bank study.
Okay.
So we have.
Need to update that, yeah.
CBAM goods. So if that's the source, I would not see it.
Good. We can happily talk about it, and I think you had more recent data, so that's always good. I had more limited research.
If you don't mind me, maybe that on that note, if I may, just because, and then we'll return back, we can switch to maybe more recent data, and that is with the Serbian Chamber of Commerce. So Tanja, if we can move to you. What feedback, I mean, and for the benefit of those who are not from Belgrade, the Serbian Chamber of Commerce follows the German model, so it's a compulsory chamber. It has 100% representation of the entire economy. So if anybody has a snapshot of what's going on, what are you hearing from the industry?
Well, first, thanks of all for getting an opportunity to understand.
The microphone, yeah.
It's on. Thanks. Thanks a lot for opportunity to be on this panel, even though we are the partners in organizing this event. What do we hear from the economy? When they will give up on this? Whatever new directive comes from the EU, the companies are always asking when they're going to give up on that. But nevertheless, CBAM has been, I think, one of the most interesting and most discussed topics in the last 2 years in between the companies. The ones from the sectors that are already under the CBAM and the ones that are not, but they're curious because they know that there will be introduction of new sectors and sooner or later they will be in. And 2 years ago, when we started, based on the scope of the CBAM, we have identified around 2,400 companies that are exporting CBAM goods. Producers, most of them, but there are also traders. And those ones are still not even aware that they're in obligation to do their reporting and that it's under them. But these 2,400, they have been active so far. We have seen from Delphine presentation that there is a good response in the sense of reports from Serbia, and also what I'm very proud of, that those reports are based on the actual data, that companies are using much less of reference values, which is good because that means that they have done their job, they have done their homework, meaning that they have analyzed their production, identified the emissions, they have started monitoring and measuring the data. And now with this simplification, it is a relaxation for a huge number of companies, but it will not be that ratio 80%, 20% as it is in the case of the importers. Based on data that we could analyze, we have identified that around 500 companies will still remain in the scope, meaning that those 500 companies are exporting more than 50 tons. And that number can be only bigger because what we can analyze the export data from Serbia. But the new rule is for the left 50 tons import in EU, meaning that we have a Serbian company or company from the region that is exporting 35 tons to one buyer, and if that buyer from EU has couple of more other buyers from somewhere else in the world, then immediately they are already in the scope. That means that this 500 can be even more. And this is only from the sectors that we are having now. If we have by the end of the year or sooner or later new sectors, this will introduce only new companies. So think that we have spreaded the awareness, we have spreaded the knowledge. What we wanted to aim was to explain the companies that CBAM, the same as any kind of other carbon accounting, is just the first review of your emissions and where you're standing, to compare yourself with the benchmark of the sector, of the competition, region, and also the European sector level, because as we have heard so far, the CBAM is a reflection from EU ETS with a clear intention to introduce possibility for European companies to gain back some of the businesses. And this is where our competition is. So the competition from the sector in the region, other markets, and the European companies. And once they set up the level of their emission with the CBAM reports, then that is the only starting point for the next steps, which are more important, and Delphine has highlighted that a few times, and that is decarbonization. And I think that this preparatory job is done. We have settled down the system of the information for the companies, as Marko said, a channel of communication where I can really say that daily we receive the questions from the companies. And we have established the workshop where most of the companies that are now under the scope have gone through, and it's ready for the new ones from the new sectors. But now we have to work to establish the environment for the companies to go on the next step, and that is decarbonization.
Tanja, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, talking about companies, and back to what Till was mentioning, which is the World Bank study. So this study is controversial in the sense that we hear voices from all sides of the aisle asking questions about this study. There have been other studies by Sciences Po, a number of others. And a thing which is a common denominator amongst most of them is that the energy sector, specifically electricity in Serbia, and we heard the minister this morning, is coal intensive, significantly, one of the highest in the region, and is probably one of the most exposed to the CBAM. That brings me to Jovana Joksimović, the Assistant Minister at the Ministry of Energy in charge of e-integration. Hello, Jovana. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for first of all organizing this conference, and also for distinguished guests and participants, because this is very insightful for until now for myself, and I believe that it will be fruitful discussion today. Well, as you said, only 5 minutes, and in addition to the time concerns, we have to do something and to measure the impact and to establish a system and to deal with just transition to decarbonize in less than 3 years. And our partners from EU had 2 decades to cope with it. So that will be the first, let's say, remark from my side, just to have the full picture, what and how should we implement CBAM. And of course, we are in the EU integration process, and Madam Minister said today the SSP was signed quite time ago, and we said free trade, we said economic growth, we said to work on the reforms as a government to establish and to better the citizens, the well-being of the citizens and the economy and the GDP growth. Taking into account all that was said today and all the analysis that we as Ministry of Mining and Energy took in last 2 years, And we were very dedicated and still are dedicated. We did the impact assessment only on energy sector, taking into account our key challenge, which is, of course, coal, heavily coal oriented. There are a few things that I would like to highlight and that are something that we should do in parallel, something that we should discuss and have credible, let's say, partners and credible discussion and also credible actions. Firstly, when we done the CBAM analysis and of course when we done our job in seeing what the CBAM regulations are, we saw that the emission factor that was calculating the emissions directly and indirectly is being calculated with numbers as we are 100% fossil fuel in our energy mix, which is not the reality. The reality is that we are currently having 60% and that we will have by 2030 45% in production of the energy from renewables. So this will neglect the efforts in decarbonization if it stays this way. The emission factor, if it stays this way, this will leave us to neglect the efforts, the funds, the activities, the projects, not just the publicly owned projects, but also the privately owned projects in renewables. If we don't have the emission factor which will foresee the growth of renewables in energy mix as time passes. And this is, let's say, the first thing. And we also sent a letter to DG TAXUD and also other DGs in European Commission and also Secretariat of the Energy Community Treaty, because I see here distinguished colleagues also. And we expect to have this revised, somehow acknowledged, not somehow, but acknowledged. And this will be the let's say, very first step when it comes to regulations. When it comes to our efforts in market integration in the electricity sector, and I really like to say that we are, of course, striving to become EU member states, and we are on that path, but we are already part of Europe. So we are interconnected very well. Serbia definitely, let's say, is doing this and putting additional efforts in transmission system connections. And if we're speaking about trade, introduction of the renewables, battery storages, new projects that we foresee in upcoming period when it comes to balancing, we are the first contracting party that introduced the changes of the law on energy and transposed electricity integration package. And we are now in the process of verification, and also I will use this opportunity to call the European Commission and distinguished Secretariat of the Energy Community Treaty to do this process as soon as possible or to accelerate in order for us to meet our goals to have the market coupling in the window as we foreseen by Q4 2026. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because at the recent Athens Forum and yesterday the announcement of NSOE, we foresee that these two processes, the introduction or the implementation of CBAM, should go hand in hand with the market coupling. So not to stop the market coupling by introducing the CBAM mechanism, and also to try to parallelize these two processes. This is our call to European Commission and also to involve all relevant European institutions to push the efforts in order to see and to do the impact assessment. How is this supposed to be implemented, the CBAM, not jeopardizing the market coupling process? And this is jeopardizing not just, we said, the economy, we said this is also jeopardizing the energy security, so very directly. Third thing is that we are in the making, or let's say the finalization of the analysis of the CBAM for all goods. And then we will, as a government, of course, decide which model will be used for the carbon pricing mechanism. And we welcomed that the European Commission recognized the efforts and also recognized that we should have a model, tailor-made model, and that kind of individual approach when it comes to different parts of this region. We expect that, we also done the previous, let's say, analysis, and our, let's say, main goal is to not to jeopardize, of course, the economy and the citizens when it comes to energy, the electricity prices, and to see, so not just to have the environmental protection as one, of course, as a top priority of the government, but also to not to neglect and leave no one behind when it comes to this transitional period and reforms that we are taking. And I would use also this opportunity to say that we as a ministry are open for discussion. We are here to of course listen and of course to meet and to discuss, but to take into account really all the processes that we are driving currently. So EU integration process, reform agenda, all the steps that we are following in order to be part of EU family, but also to not to neglect our economy, our industry, and our citizens, and how we should, let's say, do our jobs in the best possible way.
Thank you, Jovana. Okay, well, let's move now. So let's move to Uroš. Uroš, you have a number of hats. So you come here as, in a way, as a rep of AmCham. You are a trusted advisor at KPMG, a U.S. consultancy, which is interesting in the days of environmental protection globally, advising sovereigns and industry. So what do you hear from your clients?
Many thanks. The only thing that we're not partners of this conference. No, but
Next time.
Yeah, next time. Jokes aside, thank you very much. I hope by next year, we have resolved the issue and there is no need for the conference. No. But jokes aside, really, I think that the further the conversation goes, it's really hard to say something new and refreshing because we heard so many things. And but I will try to maybe put some light on some stuff that we haven't heard yet, or we haven't heard much about. I would say, firstly, speaking of the Western Balkans, it's and CBAM, it's very clear that it's the same way towards the Western Balkans is going, but the starting point is very different, and this is very important to underline. So this is somewhat an issue of a different priority in each and every country. And I would say that speaking of Serbia and also Bosnia and Herzegovina and some other countries, this was a major mover when we speak about the green agenda and decarbonization, given the reliance on coal in the energy generation and reliance on carbon intensive industry, also in the economy, but as a significant part of our exports. So it's common, and yet it's very different. When we speak with the companies and with actually all of the stakeholders that are relevant for the topic, there are some things that we maybe haven't heard about so far, and it's not only about these 5 or 6 industries producing these goods. It's also about other industries. And I heard right now from Ms. Sallard that they have actually every right to be terrified, which is what they were, because you are evaluating to extend the scope to some other goods as well, which was kind of something that they saw. But you did say that, right?
No, I said that, and that's very
No, it is.
But that they would be limited to each year's goods at risk of carbon leakage. So it's not the entire EU economy as the World Bank study is based on. So that's what I wanted to stress. It will maybe extend to some sector, only each year's sector. Well, not agriculture, not
You want the
No, I understood that correctly.
delegate. So a limited number of sectors, if you want me to be blunt.
No, I know, but that limited number of sectors is still rather a significant part of our economy. So this is the thing, which is, and ultimately, when we speak about CBAM, and I think that many people said that, including Ms. Sallard, and that is very right. This is not a compliance thing. It's not a reporting thing. It's all about competitiveness, and it's all about whether you can remain or be competitive in a world where carbon has a price, which is the world where we are going at in the very near future. And this is a game that is quite tricky and hard for the local and for the regional economies, given the reality that we are in right now. And now coming back to the, let's say, other industries that are not so much in the focus right now, but what are the discussions that we're having with them? Even though CBAM is not, it's not that complex of a regulation, it has just a very far-reaching and comprehensive implications for the economy. But once you read it a couple of times, it's quite clear, how it works and how it would work for you. But what we notice, for instance, is that very few of these industries have understood how indirect emissions are being calculated. And they think, for instance, that just by buying, certificates of origin, they have resolved the issue of their carbon footprint, which is not the case. It doesn't work in practice. And it's a huge game changer. Because if we observe the FDIs, all of the foreign direct investments in the region, being EU but also non-EU, they are driven primarily with the interest of exporting to the EU. And this is now becoming a big game changer. I was in a meeting with one really multinational company, which had a totally, wrong understanding of how it's calculated. And this has totally changed their picture. I'm just trying to put some light on the complexity of the issue and very, very broad implications of it. On the other hand, what we do not discuss that much, and what is becoming more often a topic that is being discussed, is that how the change in trade patterns caused by CBAM will affect the local economy. Because you have now some really ambitious players in the local market that are investing heavily in the decarbonization, and they say, look, after the 1st of January, lots of these highly carbon intensive, cheaper goods that no longer will be able to enter EU market, they will end up in our court. And what do we do with that? We are in a very unfavorable position, and this is something that is also to be discussed on the state level, how to protect the local economy. But ultimately, I would say that the topic comes down to us being not just the neighbor to the EU, but someone who, the entire region who will be in the future part of the EU. And I think it's very clear what we need to do. It's just that we need help, and apparently we need lots of help, and we need lots of substantial help. And yes, maybe I will make a break here. Although I must say, yes, to quantify. I can just say we're talking billions per annum, probably. No, but I also saw some promising slides, some promising smiles from the first row when it came to the emissions factors. So I hope that we're moving somewhere with that.
I'm also very
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much on that one. And And talking about models and neighbors, I mean, as much as I deeply respect democracy, personally, and this is just my own take, I will always be sorry for Brexit. But one of the big beneficiaries of that event is the Western Balkans, because now we have also a power hub intellectually in terms of capacity, knowledge, and institutionally that we can follow that is in a similar, although very different situation vis-a-vis the EU and including the CBAM. And I wanted, and when we do our second round, we can a little bit reflect also on the UK approach. But before that, and to intertwine with it, it's the data question. And Marcel, on that, I'm moving to you. So we would be very interested to hear from you what's your take on everything that's happening with the CBAM? Yeah, this one.
Hello. Yeah. First of all, drago mi je što sam ovdje.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
My name is Marcel Duits. I'm from Dubrink. We see a lot of data popping up because we have a platform where suppliers provide data and importers connect that with their imports. And by that, they can turn it into one file and upload that into the EU portal. The thing is that in the past year, we had a lot of importers complaining to us about CBAM because it was so complex. It's our mission to simplify that. But of course, also, suppliers are the one who are complaining. And very often we felt we were in between explaining how CBAM works. And Uros, I agree with you. There are, unfortunately, a lot of misconceptions. For example, about the calculation. And actually, Delphine already explained a little bit how the calculation works, but I just wanted to bring it up because we see a lot of practice. For us, it's not theory anymore. We see the numbers, we see what companies are going to pay. 99% of the times, they are kind of shocked and didn't expect it would be that much. Just as an example, in the fastener industry, every time, and I think my colleague from Carbon Chain will agree with that, we have to explain that it's not just 2.5% of the emissions next year, it's most likely much higher. This is some data what we have, and this is, I can't see it that good, but on the left side, as Delphine also explained, you have the actual emissions. In this case, I just took a 2.5. I used an estimated benchmark. The benchmarks are not published yet, that's why it's estimated. And the CBAM factor. How it works is that in the green part, you'll see that you have to multiply the benchmark times the CBAM factor, and that you can deduct from your actual emissions. So let's say, in this case, 2.5 minus 1.28 times 0.975. Eventually, that you multiply times the certificate price. I for now ignore the blue part, because the blue part is indeed if you have also a CBAM which is approved by the EU in place, then you can deduct your emissions from it. In this case, I ended up on a price of 100 euros per ton. And I see a lot of factories, for example, from Serbia, now discussing with the importers who is going to pay what. But actually, I think that is a discussion only for the very, very short term. Because if we go to the second slide, I didn't see them for a while. We have in our platform a forecasting module where, for example, importers can see what the price are going to be. And I really can't see it, I'm sorry. So what you can see is that we forecast here all the way up to 2034. And with these values, so in this case, an SEE of 2.5, in 2034, you go to over 600,000 euros. And in 2030, it's 253 euros. When you're talking about 600 euros compared to 100 euros, it's not anymore a discussion about who's going to pay what. You're actually just not that competitive anymore. Now, if I go to the next slide, if I would take a default value, and I have to say this 4, we don't know what the default values are going to be at all. We can be totally wrong in here. But if it would be 4, you would talk about the price of 1,000 euros per ton in 2034. Again, the discussion who is going to pay what, and that is actually, when I spoke with a lot of clients of us who are importers, they say, we all the time talking about who is paying what. It's not about that. It's about are you gonna, and how fast are you gonna decarbonize or not? Because the importers kind of don't have a choice if prices get so high to purchase products, because in other markets it will be eventually cheaper. If we go to the next slide, you can actually compare these numbers, and you see that the price per ton is significantly increasing. Again, there are estimations made in this calculation, but what I want to prevent and what I want to advise to you, if you're talking with importers, and the reason why they are sometimes so sharp, because they're very unpleasant, I see, to suppliers, is that they see this, for example, in our system. They see these numbers coming, they're scared for it. They want to keep the relation with the supplier, they want to keep on working, especially those importers who don't have a choice of switching because they are buying a certain specific product which is only used, for example, in a machine which only you can make. They are worried about these increases in price. That's why I hope during this conference we're going to talk about, on one hand, a short-term strategy, so when the prices are still doable, but a long-term strategy. I think I have to quit.
No, that was the...
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you. This was really insightful, and I'm just conscious of time. Shall we just do a very quick round with the panel, and then we can open the floor to Q&As? So Till, maybe back to you first, if you want to reflect on everything that we discussed so far.
With pleasure. I think what really came out of this discussion is that it isn't necessarily correct to only focus on the sectors that are directly affected, but that trade effects and the competitive process in each of these countries goes far beyond the directly affected sectors, but economic effects will be far more widespread because each of the directly affected sectors has suppliers, has customers, and the trade displacement effects have also been mentioned. I think if from that perspective, the old World Bank study has its merits, and the OECD study looking only at the affected sectors is perhaps just a bit short-sighted in that respect.
Thank you. Jovana, I heard you nodding, so would you like to follow up on this?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for the opportunity to wrap up a bit. Definitely, I would also add social effects. In positive way, the environmental effects, but the social ones we should definitely take into account. And also something that I wanted to highlight is that we are keen to decarbonize. We are already on that road. But in that sense, it would be good if we could have proportionally calculated support by the EU to be eligible for the funds that EU member states are, so the Innovation Fund, Modernization Fund, and all other decarbonization or just transition fund, because we are not. We are EU integration or EU accession candidate country for quite time. We have limited sources, and I also want to thank the European Commission, European Union, that we have the support from EPA sources. But when we calculated the EU ETS on the electricity impact and how and what should our energy companies pay, we see that it's like 1/2 of the investment plan for the Republic of Serbia in energy infrastructure for 2020 until 2028. So the size is it's quite substantial, and of course every project in energy sector takes time for preparation, for work, for being on grid. So it's not in half year, it's not 2 years, it takes some time. And of course we are not encouraged by all this, and on contrary, we are highly dedicated, but this is a plea from our side to see how we can fit in all the benefits that EU member states have if we are already taken the obligations.
Thank you very much, Jovana. So Tanja, we've been now listening from everyone, including this really, at least to me, really cool data that we got from Marcel. And you guys, first of all, you're a chamber of the entire economy in Serbia. You're also a member of the WB6, which is all of the regional chambers together. What's your sense? I mean, how much are individual companies, SMEs, the big ones even, aware of what all of our panelists were mentioning, especially the data that Marcel showed in his slides just now?
They are aware, and we will have representatives of a couple of companies from here and from the region, and they will probably confirm the same. So what we hear so far is there is a lot of calculation and analysis from the institution, from the supporting sector, from the world banks, but the companies have their own calculation. And in this calculation, CBAM is only one part. I mean, they have to calculate what is the working cost, which they are struggling now with an increase in the salaries, and they have to back up that somewhere, and they have to secure the business running. We are not anymore the low-cost country. We are now promoting ourselves as a well-developed industry country, and this cost of the CBAM is something that is already in the discussion. As Marcel said, who's going to pay this? This question is repeatedly mentioned in the emails, in the meetings, in between the companies and their buyers, and there are real negotiations who is going to pay that. The importers are seriously expecting that part of this cost will be covered by the decrease in the purchase price from our companies, and our companies are trying to find the space in the cost calculation, how to cover that. And there is where the support should come. I mean, we are expecting that part of these green funds from EU should cover also our efforts here, but we cannot expect only that. I mean, we have to recognize what is the need and support for our companies. I mean, decarbonization is a process. It's a long process. It can have some activities in the short term that will give some results, but it costs. It costs, and the companies need to have support for that. I mean, part of it they can finance, and they are prepared to finance. And big companies, we talk about now only big companies that are remaining in the scope. They started their decarbonization some time ago, but now closer they're coming. I mean, the more expensive projects are there, and there they need the support from the financial institutions, from the state, from the subsidies, from some programs. And also what they are concerned, and I'm talking here about all the regions, and it's not only for our region, it's for the worldwide, outside the EU, is how to protect our market from the goods that will not be competitive in the CBAM sense on the European market anymore. I think Uroš mentioned this, and this is very important, because whenever we have some boundaries, we have some limitations in the export to the EU, we are faced with the reality that all these goods are trying to find a buyer on our market. And that is something that we should never lose from our view when we talk about CBAM. And so support to the companies together with them and protect the market.
Understood. Thank you very much. So maybe I'm getting a vibe here, a sense that we sound as though everything is very dire and we're just ringing the alarm bells. But let's try to do a different exercise. So Uroš and Marcel, you guys also do a lot of advising. So if you were advising any of the stakeholders, be it the European Commission, individual governments, companies, what would you, based on everything that we discussed now, what would you tell them? What's the constructive approach? What should we do? And who?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'll be very concise. I think, like I said in the closing of my first mini talk here, I think it's very clear. It's very clear what we need to do. There are lots of things that we can do locally. There are lots of things that have started moving in a way, but a lot of things to be done. When I say locally, also mean regionally, in sense of firstly, setting a price on carbon. In some markets, such as Serbia, preconditions in sense of the local MRV mechanisms have been put in place. In some others, they have not. They need to, how to say, keep the speed. So we should somewhat do it in a same or similar way. Then we're talking about complementary mechanisms. Once you introduce it, you should introduce some kind of a decarbonization fund. Once you introduce any price on carbon, it's very clear and natural that you need to have your own protection mechanism similar to what CBAM is. And then there are numerous industry-specific measures that should be introduced locally and regionally in order to support decarbonization. Just to avoid any doubt, I mean, whoever knows me here from before, I'm a firm believer in the green transition. I strongly believe that we have no alternative future, or that if we do, it's not a good future. So I believe, speaking of Europe, is that the Western Balkans, if we speak about integrated climate resilient Europe tomorrow, Western Balkan needs to be part of the solution, not to be left out of it. And I will close with that one.
Thank you very much. Marcel.
Well, first of all, if it's in Serbia, I would talk to you for advice. It's not easy because it's in one hand it's CBAM, but it's maybe also a little bit a mentality change. Like many of our clients are against CBAM. Those are the steel traders, and they come to us and they say, look, how can I determine my price if I only will know in 2027 what the certificate costs are going to be, but I need to make the import in 2025 and I'll import it in 2026. They kind of ignore it sometimes. And it first starts with the mentality change. And I don't want to be against them some kind of climate boy, but I tell them like, guys, this is reality. You need to start realizing that you have to price this in your price. That's why I also came with cost, because the first thing I would do is calculate, so what is going to cost me on losing clients, and how much do I have to increase my product price in the upcoming years, and what will be the effect on my business. And if you calculate those costs and you compare that with eventually the investments, that's what I would do. And then strategy-wise, the question is then going to be like on which markets in the world you're going to focus, etc. But it's a much more deeper discussion. But the costs are what I see the most important factor, and you have to map them out.
Understood. Thank you very much. Okay, on that note, maybe we can open the floor to questions. Does anyone want to start? Please don't be shy. Please.
Hi, I'm Blair. I'm an American. I've been based in Belgrade for the last 3 years, and I've been abroad for about 10 years. I'm from Massachusetts. And my question for the panel is, I'm also an influencer promoting Serbia. So I think it's great that Serbia has brought Brussels here. But as an American and seeing over the years how we've kind of regressed when it comes to climate change and the talks, I think my question is, what can Serbia do to show the world that they are making progress, that they are taking the steps, that they want to be part of the solution? Because honestly, a lot of people just don't know, especially for Americans. We can't even find you guys on a map. But I think what you're doing here is wonderful. But again, a lot of people seriously just don't know. That's my question.
Thank you. Well, shall we, Jovana, maybe, in terms of what Serbia is doing environmentally, you being the official on the panel, do you want to have a crack at it? It's nice PR, even in front of the Commission and the energy community, so, give it a go.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I don't know where to start, because at least for the last 2.5 years, we done a tremendous job in energy sector. And when it comes to regulatory, of course, first the framework, then we open the market for private sector, for renewables, for auctions, for renewables, so more energy from the renewables in our energy mix. For environmental protection, last year was done the biggest project when it comes to environmental protection for desulfurization of 10A, and it was 230 million euros worth. So what we have from the capacities of thermal power plants, we are very hardly trying to also have to set the best standards when it comes to the environmental protection. Regarding the electricity and the efforts of saving the electricity, or to say what kind of the best possible or the cheapest electricity is the one that's not been spent. So there is a huge investment program, and when I say huge, it's worth 30 million euros last year, where we running the program in setting the energy efficiency measures in the local self-governments, public sectors, publicly owned buildings, but also the privately owned. And we will conduct the first ESCO model project regarding the multi-apartment buildings. So this is also something that's, let's say, moving ahead and very first and piloting together with our partners from EBRD. We're working closely also with World Bank and all relevant actors, and also it's supported, the part of these efforts are supported from the EU. So I believe that when we join our forces, funds, knowledge, and technology innovation, we have the results. And this is, let's say, not just the beginning, but we are in the middle of putting the extra energy to, let's say, boost the transition and to not to be just green. I really am very keen to the principle, leave no one behind. So to be just and of course to be sustainable. So as a government and from the ministry where I am, this is the driven force.
Thank you very much.
If I may just add briefly, yourself being an influencer, I was on a conference, another conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was, for instance, shocked to find out there were members of the scientific community, also some parts of various institutes and universities, and I was shocked to find out myself that there are numerous teams across Serbia working on so many genial, innovative solutions that are to boost green transition globally. But what these people lack, they lack the ability to converge this into into a marketable story. And I think that this is something that all of us should be doing. And I think the ideas and the projects that are going on that I was listening to, that was just amazing. Some people are working alongside with the European universities on some solutions that should boost the EU transition. And now, coming back to my closing remark, meaning us being the integral to the solution within the EU, the issue is that we as a region, we can do so many things, but to be honest, we can hardly do it ourselves. It's not possible. So we will not be able to decarbonize from inside. So, yeah.
Okay. Tanja, anything from the industry, perhaps?
Well, from the chamber, I can say that I think we have a biggest influencer among the Serbia. Our president is highly promoting everything. He posted a LinkedIn and Instagram before even he opened the conference. But I think that many people here are very well connected. The companies through their supply chains, through the international buyers, the representatives of this community here and all the institutions. And I think that we are all working together in the same line, and we are all trying to promote on our levels and in our group of contacts that there is a really, really, really high level of interest, of willingness, preparedness from the companies, and already many steps are done. And I think that we are maybe far away from some final goal, but there is a good way that we are taking.
Thank you. Please, just a second. The mic is coming your way. Professor Riley.
Alan Riley, Atlantic Council and College of Europe. So I'm trying to be positive rather than gloomy. So I think there are two things which are, there are a few things which are, you could see this as obviously you can see it as an immediate problem, but it has also ways of dealing with it which are potentially transformative. So I'll give you one. Everyone talks about kind of particularly solar, wind, and so forth. But one of the real issues is batteries. There's a lot of battery development going on. And we're actually at the cusp of a lot of that. And the very fact of CBAM is likely to create a situation where you can get, for example, behind-the-meter battery storage, which essentially means if you've got solar, domestic solar, you can use that, or you can essentially charge up all the power you use during the day at night at lower rates. This is, that's literally only 3 or 4 years away, I think, from being very substantially rolled out and very cheap. The other thing which is very interesting, and you saw this yesterday with the announcement that Rolls-Royce being given the go-ahead with small modular reactors, and apparently the Czechs have already put in a contract with Rolls-Royce as well. I think the SMRs really come in here, and again, they're only like 3 or 4 years away. Because if you think about CBAM does to industry and the costs, of course, you only have those costs if you're producing electricity with carbon-based fuels. If you have nuclear, and the nuclear is relatively cheap, you don't have the CBAM issues. So I think one of the consequences of CBAM is to turbocharge the interest in nuclear, potentially the rollout, as we will see in the late 2020s, early 2030s, of SMRs. So that's one of the places. I think there are positives you see around that, which would allow most of Serbian industry to continue without getting into a lot of the issues to do with CBAM.
Thank you. Well, talking about nuclear, I mean, thanks to the EU and the Commission and the new taxonomy that made nuclear unequivocally green, we've seen, changes in legislation here in the region. But on that point, I mean, who would like to reflect first? I see a couple of people interested in what Professor Riley said. Jovana, you're smiling the most. Do you want to go first?
To go first. Regarding the nuclear, yes, thank you very much. We are definitely thinking about that. By changes of the law in November, the ban that was the moratorium that was on nuclear previously introduced now doesn't exist anymore. So we are in the very first phase of analyzing what are the potentials of the use of nuclear in the production of the electricity, and we expect to have this analysis done, I believe, end of July. Will be, let's say, the work that done. And as Bogdan rightly said, somehow nuclear become clean energy in 21. Serbia is the all newcomer when it comes to nuclear, and I believe that we have the knowledge and we have the capacities for this very, very first phase. Regarding the technology, we are definitely monitoring this very, very streaming the technologies that are and recent developments. So yesterday, yes, we are aware of the Rolls-Royce and SMRs. The proven technology will come, as you said, in 3 to 4 years. It will be definitely then the period when we start or finish the first phase under the International Atomic Agency methodology. We are in communication already with them. The changes of the law were done in accordance with their 3 phases, and I believe that we will have much clear picture in upcoming period when it comes to nuclear. Also, when it comes to conventional, it takes time to build it. The facility SMRs are something that's now also in running the process of making the nuclear facilities in smaller scales. Currently, Serbia hasn't decided on the technology. So firstly, to see what are the possibilities, and then I think that we will run this race jointly with the technology development and pros and cons for conventional and SMRs. So that will be from my side.
Thank you very much. And still, I wanted to say you've been awfully quiet.
No, that's not my biggest problem. In this context, though, I thought maybe just a small word of caution. I think you mentioned the social effects. And for a country that is predominantly, or to a large extent, still focusing on lignite, coal production, one should not underestimate the consequences of a complete change. I think the change must come, but it must be done in a way that kind of keeps people aligned with the state. And that is, I think, a difficult question. Germany has its experience in this context with the large lignite closures in East Germany. They suggest that indeed you have to take the social factor into consideration when you do that, but no doubt it needs to be done.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of that clock blinking at us. Okay, we can try to squeeze in one more question, and then we need to close it. So the lady in the back.
Hello, everybody. Maya Rašović, Energy Financing Team, actually electricity sector. Thank you for organizing the event. I'm going to tell you quickly, it's due to be said. My question to the Commission and to the panelists is that actually with electricity as CBAM good, something rare happens. It puts, CBAM regulation puts price on renewable electricity. And not just any price, it's the price calculated on the basis of fossil fuel coefficients that Jovana mentioned. So my question would be, should we expect any kind of improvement in the regulation before the 2026 kicks in? And that, to keep it short.
Should we give that first to the Commission and then? Yeah.
Well, I mentioned that we should be publishing.
No, the other one. Yeah, I think it.
We should be well, first let's say that the CBAM regulation foresaw that there should be before the end of 26 an analysis indeed of that question. So that was foreseen. And I can announce or mention that we will be publishing a call for evidence, which is a public survey of some possible change to the accounting of the CO2 factor for electricity. But I'm not telling you what will be the decision. It will depend on on the study. We have two studies ongoing. The study on indirect emission, well, both of them we consulted stakeholder, and I know that for at least the one on indirect emission, we consulted Untitled Serbia. And we are doing that public consultation to also gather feedback from stakeholders. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much. On that note, because when we were discussing SMRs, that was pretty much, I wanted to raise that because it comes back to the same question. But I mean, Till, would you like to first reflect on this one? As I said, you've been awfully quiet. And then, Jovana, you can close if you want, or Uroš, whoever. I see a number of people raising hands. Yes, please.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to receive the information and the response. We kickstarted this topic quite time ago, and really are keen to learn how it will develop, and looking forward to be developed in the positive way, because if we're speaking about non-discriminatory, if we're speaking about decarbonization, then it should be streamlined with practices of let's say good will and partnership nourished. So that will be from my side.
Till, Uroš, nothing to say? Thank you very much. Tanja, Marcel? Okay, thank you very much for this. It was quite insightful. Thank you all. And yeah, back to our key moderator. Thank you, panel. So
Okay. All right. Many thanks for the inspiring discussion. Now we'll have a coffee time, let's say 15 minutes, so we'll be back at 12:05 sharp. Okay, thank you.